Okay, so this video came off the back of a video that I put out a couple of weeks back, and it was 15 Pentax features that you must try, or I think you should try at least anyway. And if you haven't seen it, that will be linked down below. In this video, there's no messing about, we're jumping straight into the camera's menu, and it's going to be 25 settings that I always use on this camera, the Pentax K3. So as I say, no messing about, let's jump right in. Okay, we're straight into the camera. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you how I set up my quick menu. And I'm saying quick menu, I'm talking about pressing the info button to get into this. And this is what I'm interpreting as the quick menu. Whether it's called that or not, I do not know. Anyways, let's start from the top here. So I've got the auto ISO adjustment range, and I've got this set to, well, you can see there, it's from 100 to 12,800 because I'm not scared of the high ISO. I've got programs these days what deal with that very well, and I've got the parameters set up to automatic, standard, and that's how fast it goes up and down the auto ISO. Highlight corrections are off, shadow corrections are off, as is the digital filter, no need for that. HDR capture, I don't shoot HDR, so I don't need that. I shoot 99% in the daytime, so I don't need the autofocus assist light. Much the same as the auto ISO, I've set the camera's high ISO noise reduction to auto, as I've set the slow shutter speed noise reduction to auto as well. I don't have the distortion correction on, I can correct that in post, but I do like the chromatic aberration correction on when I'm shooting JPEGs, and as you can see, currently I am shooting JPEGs. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, the reason why I'm doing that, alongside RAW. Peripheral illumination corrections, I do not have that on, that is set as off. Autofocus mode, well for me, it's got to be autofocus continuous, considering that I shoot a lot of fast action, that's a must. And my autofocus active area, I like to have a single point that I can select. I'll show you how that works there. You come out here, and you press this button over here, and you can just move your autofocus single point around the frame, put it where you like, press that and it locks it in. Next up we have the JPEG and RAW I've got mine set up to, and this is shooting on memory card 1 and 2, separate cards. And the reason I've done this is because currently I'm working on some colour profiles that I'm playing around with in the camera, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that further along in the video. And I've got obviously the RAW files are set up to DNGs, the JPEG files are set as large and as best quality as they can be. Shake reduction, this depends on what I'm shooting and how fast or slow my shutter speed is. I switch between on and off all the time. And the AA filter simulator I have as off. So those are my quick menu settings. And just on the main display here, as you can see, I've got my white balance set up to multi-auto white balance. I quite like this white balance because it brings out the natural tones of each colour on varying light sources as well. And you can always correct this in post when you're shooting RAW. I've got my continuous shooting set to high at the moment. Shooting motocross, found that works pretty well, especially with the PLM lens that I use. Metering mode, my metering mode here is obviously set to evaluative, and the reason I do that is because it's the only metering mode which is pretty much the same across the board, whether I use a Pentax camera, a Canon camera, Sony, whatever. The flash is set as manual, and I think that's it for the main interface here. So the color profiles on the Pentax camera that you can change, it's quite a interesting thing to me, and especially when using them with your JPEG images, so that the locked into the file, the embedded into the file. And I'll be making a separate video about this because I've just started to really delve into it a little bit more and had some interesting results so far. And I think there's some life in it. I think that there's a bit of playing around that we can get, especially when you pair that with things like exposure compensation and purposely underexposing or overexposing images with these color profiles, depending on the light variation that you've got. So as I say, I'll be making a separate video about this in the future to see what I can come up with. So I'm going to jump in here and show you how I've actually got my colour profiles set up. I only use 2 colour profiles at the moment. The first of which is the muted colour profile, and the second is natural. That's just because of my personal taste. I like these colour profiles, but I haven't left them as standard. What I've done is I've edited them to my taste, and this is an ongoing process, but what I'll do now is just show you how they're set up, starting with muted. And to get into the adjustment parameters, just press the info button here. I have the saturation on this set up to -2, the toning is off, the high and low key adjustment is set at +2, the contrast is +3, the highlight adjustment is maxed out at +4, the shadow adjustment is maxed out but on the minus side at -4, and the sharpness is standard set at 0, and that is for the muted profile. Now let's go back and take a look at the natural profile that I've got set up. Starting with the saturation, it's at -3, the hue is as set normal, 0, the high and low key adjustment set at +1, and the contrast is -2, the highlight adjustment +4, as is the shadow adjustment contrast, but that's on the minus side at -4, and the sharpness again is set to 0. And as I've said, these are an ongoing process that I am changing all the time to get a feel for what I like and save as JPEGs. If you like this video, remember thumbs up, it helps the algorithm out, it'll show it to more people like yourself, and consider subscribing to the channel. So next up, I'm going to show you how my user modes are set up. And as you can see here, on the Pentax K3, we have 3 user modes. My most used user mode is number 2, which is sports, obviously. The first one I've got set as panning, and I also use that for sports quite a lot. And my third is set for flash. Now there's some things that go across the board with these user modes, and that is, first off, it's button customization, and you can customize certain buttons. And as you can see here, this is how mine's set up. I've got the raw FX button, which is located here on the camera on the side. I've got set that up to toggle between image stabilization on or off, which is quite handy for me, so I'm just pressing that when I want shake reduction on, shake reduction off. The autofocus button, AF2, this is the back button basically, so I want that back button focusing, and that's how I've got it set up on AF2, enable AF2. The preview dial I've got set up to digital preview. So those are the button customizations that I've got set across the board. They're the same for each of my 3 separate user modes. Now, most modern Pentax bodies, such as the K3, KS2, K70, K1, KP, all of those type of cameras have the option to change a lot of custom menu features within the camera. So what I'm going to be doing now is going from 1 to 27, I believe it is, of the in-depth menus, and show you how I've got those set up on my trusty Pentax K3. We've got 27 different menus here to go through, so I'm not going to babble on, I'm going to just show you exactly how they set up. So number 1, EV steps is set up to 1, sensitivity steps is number 2, the meter operating time I've got set up to number 3, the AEL autofocus lock is set up to number 2, link the exposure point and the focusing point, I've got that set up to number 2, auto EV compensation is on 1, the bulb mode is on 1, the bracketing order is on 1 push bracketing is on 2, white balance adjustment range is on 1, the white balance when using flash is on 2, auto white balance in tungsten mode under tungsten light is set to number 1, color temperature steps is set to 1, superimpose the autofocus area is set to 1, AFS setting is set to 1, first frame in action in AFC is set to number 3, action autofocus continuous shooting is set to number 1, autofocus hold I've got set to number 4, autofocus when using the remote control is set to number 1, release while charging is set to 1, or release the shutter while charging is set to 1, the colour space is on number 1, the LCD panel illumination is on number 3, the information rotation, save the rotation info is set to number 1, save the menu location is set to number 1, catch and focus is enabled, and is set to number 2, that's on. Autofocus fine tune adjustment is set to number 3, because I want to adjust individual lenses, and using the aperture ring is set to number 1, and that is 1 to 27 on the Pentax K3 in-depth menu. That's how I've got mine set up. If you want to see how these settings work for me in a real world scenario, check out the video up next. It'll be linked over here or over here. I'll see you over there.